Caterpillar, Caterpillar by Vivian French, illustrated by Charlotte Voake. Caterpillar, Caterpillar. My father and my grandfather both liked gardening very much, but my grandfather used to grow stinging nettles. My father didn't. He said they were weeds and rooted them out. "Why don't you get rid of your nettles?" I asked my grandfather. "Stinging nettles grow butterflies," he said. "Go and look." I went and looked. I couldn't see any butterflies, though. My grandfather turned one of the nettle leaves over to show me the bumps on the back of it, but I didn't know what they were. "Butterfly eggs," said my grandfather. "What kind of butterflies?" My grandfather peered closely at the bumps. "I don't have my glasses on," he said, "but they could be tortoise shells or peacocks. They both like nettles. If you keep an eye on them, you'll see when the caterpillars hatch." "Won't they crawl away?" I asked. My grandfather straightened up and looked down at me. "Huh," he said. "You just keep watching." So I did. Nettles will sting you if you touch them, but they won't sting the caterpillars. The eggs are dome-shaped with little ridges. Each egg is about the size of the top of a pin. Most butterflies lay their eggs in ones or twos, moving from plant to plant. Peacocks and tortoiseshell butterflies lay lots of eggs at once. Nothing happened at all for 2 days. It rained very hard on the second day, but the eggs were still safe. The next day, there were lots and lots of little tiny caterpillars crawling on the nettle leaves. The eggs were papery and empty. I squashed some with my fingernail. The caterpillars eat their way out of the eggs when they're ready to hatch and stay together in a big crowd. They make a web of white silk between the stem of the plant and the leaves. It's like a tent. When they've eaten all the leaves nearby, they move on and make a new tent. My grandfather came over to see what I was doing. "Ah," he said, "peacock caterpillars." "Did they eat cabbage?" I asked. I'd seen caterpillars on cabbages. He shook his head. "Caterpillars are fussy eaters. If you put a nettle-eating caterpillar on a cabbage, it'll set off to look for nettles. And if it can't find any, it'll sit down and die rather than eat cabbage." Some of the caterpillars you see on cabbages are cabbage whites. They love cabbage. Orange-tip caterpillars eat lady's smock and garlic mustard. Sometimes they eat each other. Comma caterpillars like hops best, but sometimes they have to make do with nettles. Peacock, small tortoiseshell, and red admiral caterpillars all like nettles best. He looked at my peacock. I looked at my peacock caterpillars. They were all together in a little crowd, eating as fast as they could. "Won't the birds eat them?" I asked. "Couldn't we cover them up?" "No need," said my grandfather. "Caterpillars that don't hide away are really saying, 'I'm poisonous, keep off,' and the birds know that." He pulled his pipe out of his pocket and very, very gently nudged one of the caterpillars. It curled itself up at once and fell off the leaf. "There," he said. "Even if something does come along looking for a snack, the caterpillar might still escape." "Can I make one curl up?" I stuck my finger out. "Don't touch them," my grandfather said. "Some spiny caterpillars can give you a rash, and other kinds leave a bad smell on your fingers. Besides, you might hurt them." The caterpillars leave little droppings wherever they go. As they get bigger, you can see their white spots more clearly. They don't mind which way up they eat, and they hardly ever stop eating. They have velvety bodies and shiny heads. Look at their spiny backs. They have 3 pairs of legs in front with little claws on them and stumpier legs farther down. I went on watching the caterpillars. They were getting bigger. By the second Saturday in July, they had eaten almost all the plant they had hatched on and were crawling all over the other nettles. Some of them were lying completely still, though, and not eating at all. All of a sudden, one of them gave a little wriggle, and its skin split right open. Inside was another brand new caterpillar, and it crawled out of the old skin as if it were crawling out of a sleeping bag. It looked very fresh and clean, and it seemed to be bigger than before. All the other caterpillars changed skins too. When they're ready to change their skin, caterpillars spin a little silk mat on the leaf and fasten their last 2 legs on it. I knew something must be eating my caterpillars, because by now there weren't so many of them. I didn't mind that, but I did mind 5 days later when I found that every single one of them had disappeared. "Where have they gone?" I asked. I was close to tears. "Pea sticks," said my grandfather. We marched around the corner of the shed to where the pea sticks were. "Sometimes 1 or 2 come here," my grandfather said. "Ah, yes, here we are." Sure enough, there was one of the caterpillars hanging head downward off a pea stick. And to my amazement, before my very eyes, its skin began to peel off from its head upward and shriveled away. This time there wasn't another caterpillar ready to come out. Instead, there was something like a little soft brown bag hanging on the pea stick. It didn't have legs or eyes or anything, and it dried up into a little case. My grandfather said that was just what it was, but the proper name for it was pupa or chrysalis. "But where's the caterpillar gone?" I asked. "All the bits of caterpillar were inside the case," he said, "and they were changing." When they're ready to pupate, the caterpillars leave their nettles. Each one of them finds a place to be on their own. It might be up a tree, a fence, a stick, or a twig. They make a tiny white pad. Then they attach their back legs to it and hang upside down. Soon their skin peels off, leaving behind a beautiful pupa. It's green if it's on a leaf and brown if it's on a twig. Just this once, I was allowed to bring the stick with the little case on it into the kitchen. I watched for 10 whole days, and on the 10th day, the pupa got very, very dark. The next morning, I was eating my breakfast when my grandfather suddenly said, "Look!" I rushed to see, and the case of the pupa had split. Something was crawling out, but it didn't look at all like a butterfly. It was crumpled and it looked damp and it wasn't at all a pretty color. "It must have gone wrong," I said, feeling very sad. Very gently, my grandfather lifted the stick and put it on the windowsill in the sunshine. The creature crawled slowly up the stick and stopped. Little by little, it began to stretch out. It was just like watching a flower unfolding itself, only it had wings instead of petals. The wings of the butterfly unfold as liquid is pumped into its veins. They have to dry for an hour or two before they can fly. And the wings began to tremble and to shine in the sunlight. And then suddenly there it was, a real butterfly with spidery legs and its wings spread wide open. It was so lovely that I couldn't say anything at all. Then its wings fluttered and it flew off into the garden, the very newest butterfly there.